Hello and welcome. I am Dr. Lara, a clinical pharmacist specializing in functional medicine, as well as a certified yoga teacher and Reiki master. I run a truly integrative health coaching practice encompassing functional medicine lab testing, yoga and meditation, and a sprinkling of Reiki energy medicine. Join me here on Light Body Radio to break through your health plateau and come into alignment with your natural vitality. Hello and welcome to Light Body Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Lara May. And today we have with us Dr. Katelyn Lehman. She is the founder and chief systems architect of Quantum Clinic in Los Angeles, California, the first spa for your DNA, a new model of preventative care for the mind, body, spirit, and soul. At Quantum Clinic, Dr. Lehman combines elements of biofeedback training, flotation rest, frequency therapy, and expressive arts to facilitate a deeply relaxing and restorative experience. Her mission is to help leaders and the larger community achieve heart-brain coherence, doing her part to reduce the $300 billion a year loss in productivity due to stress, fatigue, and burnout. Dr. Lehman, I am so excited to have you with us today. Thank you so much for your time. And let's just jump right in by talking about how you got started and, what inspired you to start Quantum Clinic.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks so much. I'm really happy to be here today. Quantum Clinic really is kind of the evolution of both personal and professional journey to discover and build ways to support people in their healing journey. I myself have a background in clinical psychology and have worked in Los Angeles County for over 15 years in various settings like community mental health, forensic, medical legal settings, and substance abuse and rehabilitation. And here in the state of California, where I live, and Los Angeles is my home, there's a mandate, a policy, and a legal imperative to be developing prevention and early intervention spaces. And so Quantum Clinic really is a model of community-based care that supports people with stress reduction and processing of psychological and emotional content. And so we're really excited to do the work and, look forward to seeing where it takes us.
Well, so can we explain to the audience exactly what is biofeedback, just so we're all clear?
Sure. Yeah, so biofeedback basically uses different sensors. It can, be like, for instance, at Quantum Clinic, we use a heart math biofeedback sensor that measures heart rate variability, but essentially any technological component which provides real-time feedback to the user about various biological processes. So like a smartwatch actually is an example of a biofeedback technology. But at Quantum Clinic, we're specifically supporting people in achieving and accessing what's called a state of coherence. So coherence refers to like the shape of the wave patterns that are emitted or can be measured using heart rate variability. And it essentially is a state that we can access through, synchronizing our breath with our heart rate variability and our blood pressure. And it's associated with something like 5,000 different biomarkers that encode for health and human functioning. And yeah, so we think more people need to know about it and more should be practicing.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you use sound and feedback or biofeedback together to help reduce the stress and improve the physical, emotional, and mental health of your patients?
That's a great question. So, it's interesting. Sound is one of the most ancient healers, right? The Chinese word for, I believe it's like the Chinese word for sound or healing is very similar to the word for sound. And throughout ancient, civilization, sound has always been used in medicinal contexts. In Western medicine, however, mostly the sound therapeutics that are used are in the non-audible range. So you could think of like ultrasound, right? Is a type of sound that's administered to a part of the body that then produces an image, right? So we can't hear the sound that an ultrasound machine is using because it's non-audible in the non-audible range, but it is used in medical contexts. Now, more and more so, Western medicine is catching up to these ancient practices and understanding that certain frequencies or certain sounds have the ability to, through sympathetic resonance, connect with different parts of the body, either cells or organ systems, et cetera, et cetera. Sound is actually now being used at some universities to ablate cancer tumors in the body. Sound can be used to increase the oxidization of the cells in the body. And it can also be used for various kind of psycho-emotional processing outcomes. So at Quantum Clinic, the experience for people when they come in, it's really about grounding, connecting to oneself, presencing, breathing, in a guided meditation to induce a coherent state. And then people have an hour to rest in reduced environmental stimulus therapy or flotation therapy. And it's in that context that we play the frequencies. And people, so people really kind of emerge from an hour in, kind of like a light, deprived, sort of warm body of water with these frequencies playing. They emerge from that experience very transformed, often, reporting significant reductions in anxiety. It can support mood regulation if done regularly, stuff like that.
And so you already explained what coherence was and how you measure it, but how do people get into coherence then?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, it's actually through the practice of sustained, heartfelt, positive emotion. If you think about it, there's always in all the mystical traditions and spiritual, traditions, they talk about the central role of the heart in, allowing us to access deeper states of presence, reverence, awe, gratitude. But these emotional states actually have a direct physiological impact on, the internal mechanisms that connect the different systems in our body, specifically, the nervous system and the relationship between the brain and the heart. So it's through practicing joy or practicing gratitude, but not just in an abstract or mental sense. It's really about feeling joy or feeling gratitude that really shifts people's state kind of more profoundly.
And so is this, I assume it's like a guided process that people through?
Yeah, we take people through a body scan, a progressive muscle relaxation, and then we use a technique that comes out of the Heart Math Institute called Focus, Activate, Radiate. So we focus on the energetic center of the heart, activate a life-affirming or positive emotional state, and then imagine that energy radiating throughout the body. And, people have different, people have different kind of levels of capacity for this, like innately, right? Some people are innately really have a lot of ease with this, right? Whereas others it takes a little practice. And there's nothing wrong with either of those. We all come from, incredibly diverse cultural, historical, and familial contexts. And so Quantum Clinic is really a space to connect inwardly, and also in community, with those of us there in practice. And it's like going to the gym to exercise your muscles, but going to a facility where you can really practice being in loving awareness.
I love that. And so taking this to a little bit deeper level and sort of merging this, the scientific, the tangible scientific with the intangible aspects of so many of these healing modalities. How does epigenetics specifically play into healing trauma? I don't think we've talked about that on this show.
Oh, yeah.
In that context. And I really like that.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. So epigenetics is the study of gene-environment interaction, right? So it's sort of like we're moving towards greater understanding of the fluidity and the variability that's possible for gene expression, right? We all have sort of our DNA, right? Our genetic code. But the expression of that code is, very different across contexts. And epigenetics is the study of the relationship between environment and genetic expression. But that doesn't necessarily mean external environment. It can refer to, and in our case, it does refer to the inner environment, right? So if you've worked enough with people who have undergone trauma or experienced trauma, or what trauma is like from your own personal life experience, it has an impact on how we perceive and experience not only ourselves, but our relationship to the world. And so if you're provided then with these techniques that can support, resetting our inner environment, right? Modulating the experience of self that we have as we walk through the world by practicing, again, these sustained, heartfelt, positive emotions like compassion for what we've been through in traumatic experiences, or gratitude, even depending on where you are in your journey, for the lessons that came from those experiences, right? That can really shift our response to adversity. It can support us in becoming more resilient and more adaptive. Trauma is often associated with sort of this involuntary and recurrent re-experiencing of the negative or traumatic event. And so we want to provide people with ways to interrupt that cycle. This is kind of one space and one way that you can begin to explore that for yourself.
Yeah, I think what most of us don't think about is that when we have any kind of experience, but definitely a traumatic one, whether it be big T or little t trauma, if we don't process it, we store that experience, the emotions, the energetic imprints, a variety of different
our body, everywhere.
frequencies, in our body, and it stays there again unless we process it. So that's why it is so, I think, important, but also valuable. And again, it's like merging the tangible with the intangible here and unpacking it, which, so people have a deeper understanding of why, like, you can't just ignore it and expect it to go away. But you don't have to relive it and be re-traumatized through the processing. There is a happy medium, and you can help your body, you can help self. I would even venture to say, like, stop the progression of both acute and chronic illness in its tracks, processing this stuff and helping it get out. And that's, I think, also where this epigenetic piece comes in too.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you.
So, so this brings me to something else that was listed in the show notes questions that filled out for me of what is, I have a feeling like this is also like a big piece of this. Like you said, like having gratitude even for the experience and the lessons. I'm assuming the prospective, what you refer to as prospective thinking could be part of that, or is that different?
Yeah, so perspective thinking is actually a word in the scientific literature that refers to our capacity for imagination, right?
Mm-hmm.
And creating or through our imaginations, um, like different healing outcomes. So, you know, perspective thinking or imagination is, again, it's not just a cognitive activity, it's an embodiment practice that allows us to connect to both cognitive, affective, um, you know, parts of our experience, and to draw into reality that which we aspire to create, right? So
Mm-hmm.
um, it's sort of that relationship between past, present, and future, and how do we move towards that which we would imagine is in our highest and best good. Um, and that can be for individuals, it can be for us as a society, as people, you know, it can be
Mm-hmm.
applied in different ways. And so, yeah, um, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of
Yeah,
what's.
yeah. Yeah, no, I that's fascinating. So, can you maybe take us through some anecdotes or some things that you've seen in your practice from your client on a regular basis, some of the changes and transfer?
Sure, yeah. Um, so we get a lot, we work with a lot of people who deal with kind of chronic and co-occurring issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you've been paying attention to the world lately, it's likely that you're aware that we have, you know, 70% of adults have metabolic dysfunction, and chronic disease, chronic stress, chronic inflammation is contributing to a rise in autoimmune disorders, um, anxiety, depression, et cetera, chronic pain, which is also often associated with, kind of psychological distress. And so we get a lot of people who are just, I mean, for lack of a better term, just like suffering. Like the world is like it's a difficult time right now for a lot of people. And I would say the biggest impact is kind of in when folks come sort of at a more regular cadence, they're able to reconnect with this part of themselves that, although the external realities of their lives may not um, dramatically change, that as they begin to cultivate a more compassionate, loving, and supportive inner voice and inner environment, they feel more capable of showing up for the task at hand, whatever that may be in their life. Um, and that's resiliency, right? That's how we evolve and grow and stretch into these new possibilities for our lives, and giving folks a place to connect to that imaginal space within themselves so that they can, the research on stress shows that when you're super stressed or chronically stressed, like you just are not connected to what's possible because you can
Mm-hmm.
only see the crisis that's right in front of you. So if you're able to reset that by allowing your body to enter into a homeostatic state or a coherent state, then you're more capable of seeing the problem differently, thinking creatively, of connecting to possibility and potential. And that's a really important thing right now for all of us, to imagine new futures for ourselves, individually and collectively as we go forward.
Yeah, and like in your bio, when you say, doing your part to reduce that $30 billion a year loss in productivity due to stress, fatigue, and burnout. I like how that, yes, like you said, like when you're able to see and perceive things differently because you've either processed the trauma or reduced the stress, or allowed yourself the space to think, to imagine, all these different things, then yeah, we are less stressed, we are fatigued, we are less burnt out, we are more resilient, we're able to provide ourselves that space for healing while also still functioning in this Western world. Is what it is. I mean, I don't think it's possible to move through the Western world without some form of stress, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, or mental. However, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't and couldn't and don't have the tools to mitigate, process, and move through it.
Yeah. I know, I couldn't agree more. I mean, and also it's sort of a misnomer to say that stress is all bad, right? Like sometimes stress is what motivates us and pushes us to that next level, but stress, when it becomes chronic, right? When it becomes chronic, when it becomes omnipresent and pervasive, the prevailing state is stress. That's the problem, right? So, the stress response is adaptive and evolutionary. It helps us to respond to difficulty, to challenge, et cetera, et cetera. It's actually a wonderful thing. But to your point, in the Western world, stress is our default mode, right? And that's what's driving the, in addition to, kind of the conversation about diet and lifestyle, right? Stress is sort of driving the chronic disease epidemic. And so how do we provide ourselves with the skills to begin to modulate that internally, biophysiologically? Because we can't necessarily wave a magic wand and completely change society, but we can, in a moment by moment basis, work inwardly to be more flexible, more resilient, and more adaptive in light of the realities that we face.
Yeah. How, just again, from what you've seen anecdotally, in terms of like time commitment, and I, because like, this is totally like a Western question. But what have you well, what have you seen in terms of the amount of time dedicated to some of these practices? I mean, and obviously they all sound beautiful and blissful and enjoyable spaces as possible. But again, also like make it realistic for our life and our lifestyle. Have you seen sort of like the here of, maybe this minimum amount of time or this perfect amount of time to the results, to the optimal results that people are seeking?
Yeah, I would say that a cadence of like twice a month or once a month for the type of service that we're offering is really great. We have people who are coming once a week. Sometimes folks who have like something coming up in the short term that they really want to feel prepared for or ready to handle will come like kind of rapid fire sequentially over a period of couple weeks, like leading up to something. But again, this work really, once you become familiar with the coherent state inside of your own body and mind, inside of your own psyche, it's a life practice. It's a spiritual practice. It's a discipline. It's like cultivating awareness of when you're not there, and learning how to shift that for yourself is incredibly important.
Yes, that's something else that I definitely wanted to point out to our listeners, is that specifically the heart coherence practices, like this is something that once you are familiar with the feeling and getting yourself into this space, you can do anytime, any place on your own. I first learned about it through Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, and practicing some of his meditation practices, and it has become part of my daily meditation. Even if I'm not necessarily doing a specific Joe Dispenza meditation, just like you said, becoming familiar with that feeling and that space, now I can integrate it into, almost any meditation that I'm doing. And
like
meditation is a daily practice for me. So yeah.
Store, or when you're doing dishes, or right before you pick up your kids from school, or whatever the case may be, you can do those activities in a coherent state, right? Like that, and that's ultimately the spiritual discipline part of it. It's like, okay, how can I create a more loving, joyful, and vibrant world? Well, it's like by being that, in our daily lives. Yeah.
So embodying, being, one of the things I've started to say more recently on a regular that I found myself is that we're human beings, not human doings. So
totally.
So how are we being every day, and how can we be better or optimize how we are being, and just being aware. I think just bringing that awareness and that silly reminder, like we're a being, not a doing.
100%. Yeah. There's an Alan Watts quote, something to the effect of, stop measuring your days in terms of productivity and start measuring your days in terms of presence. So how can I be more present, fully present, and a recognition that when I'm stressed, or when I'm preoccupied or anxious, or, ruminating about whatever the thing may be, I'm not as present as I would otherwise if I could just reconnect to these universal spiritual truths. And so that's the practice. And don't get me wrong, it's not like easy necessarily. I mean, it is easy, really, truly. The practice is easy, but then the remembering to do it again and again, especially if we've been raised with kind of a default mode of being that isn't that, which most of us have in this world, then it takes practice, but it is possible.
Yes. Beautiful. Is there anything else that you want to touch on before we wrap up today, or anything that we haven't mentioned that you want to bring forward?
No, I think this was really lovely. I appreciate our conversation, and I hope the listeners enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, so you're at quantumclinic.com. Are you on the socials? Where do you want to send people to find out more about you, your practice, your work?
Yeah, quantumclinic.com is a great place to check it out. From there, you can find our links to social, and also my social or LinkedIn. All that stuff is on the website.
Okay, beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lehman. Again, I appreciate your presence today
Yeah, you
and all
too.
the work that you're doing. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and we will catch you in the next episode. Make sure you check out quantumclinic.com.
Thank you.